Share my screen. Okay, once again, we continue with the subjunctive and how to recognize the subjunctive and when to use the subjunctive or how it's structured. There are verbs of advice or command which are constructed with an indirect object. That indirect object in the principal or main clause also functions as the subject of the subordinate clause. The verb in the subordinate clause must be in the subjunctive. I'm gonna read that again, and then we're going to look at examples. Just in case you don't know what a clause is, a clause can be either dependent, where it's in order for it to make sense, in order for it to be included within a complete sentence, it must be complemented with an with a independent clause. You can have two independent clauses in the sentence. For example, I speak Spanish, semicolon, I live in Mexico. Those are two independent clauses. Those are two independent clauses because they can stand alone. But if I say, although I speak Spanish, comma, not semicolon, comma, although I don't speak, because wouldn't make sense. Although I don't speak Spanish, comma, that can't stand alone because you're waiting. What about you not speaking Spanish? Although I don't speak Spanish, comma, I live in Mexico. I live in Mexico, once again, can stand on its own. I live in Mexico, okay. But the although I don't speak Spanish cannot stand on its own. It is a dependent clause. So you're putting two clauses, right? Now, if you didn't have that although, then it would stand on its own. But the minute you put although, even though, because, however, all of this means that the sentence cannot stand, no, not however, it unites two different clauses, two independent plus two independent clauses. I speak Spanish, comma, no, semicolon, however, comma, I live in Russia, as an example. Those are two independent clauses united by the however. And how do you know? Because it's I speak Spanish, semicolon, and semicolon unites two independent clauses together to make one sentence. So once again, there are verbs of advice or command. The minute you say advice or command, you know you're talking about the subjunctive, because you're not talking about objective fact. You're not talking about statements of just telling me what is, or what was, or what had been, or what will be, okay? There are verbs of advice or command which are constructed with an indirect object. And we're going to look at that. What's the indirect object? That indirect object in the principal or main clause also functions as the subject of the subordinate clause. The verb in the subordinate clause must be in the subjunctive. Let's just look at an example. Here, example. Te digo que vayas con él. Right? I'm telling you. You is the indirect object. Now, you don't do it the same way in Spanish like you do in English. In English, it's subject, I, verb, am telling. Who are you telling? You. Right? So that you is the indirect object to go with him. Okay? Now, here's the problem. The structure in Spanish is different than the structure in English. So let me try to structure this as it would be structured in Spanish. I'm telling you, indirect object, that you, that same you that I'm telling, that you go with him. Now, like I said, we don't structure like that way in English, but in Spanish you do. So that indirect object you in I'm telling you, that same you is in the clause, is in the dependent clause that takes a subjunctive. So here it is in Spanish. Te digo, I'm telling you. Te digo, I'm telling you. Que. Now we're starting with another clause. That te is the subject of the next clause. Vayas con él. Que vayas con él. A lot of times you'll hear people, they won't use the te, digo, me, manda. They'll just say que vayas con él. And you already know what the first part of the sentence is. You don't have to always express it. Que vayas con él, que hables con él, que escribas, que escribas la carta. Okay. Me mandan a que, so they are ordering me to leave. So the subject of the first clause is they. The verb is ordering. Who are they ordering? The indirect object, me. And what are they ordering you to do? To leave. You don't structure the sentence like that in Spanish. You would say, me mandan. The mandan is they are ordering me. They're ordering. Who? Me. And after mandad, you use a que, not just que. A que what? That I leave. So when they say me mandan a que vaya, that vaya, the subject of the vaya is yo. So if you want to, you could put me mandan a que yo vaya, but nobody would say it like that. They wouldn't put the subject. But the indirect object in the first clause is the subject in the second clause. So me mandan a que yo vaya. Te digo que tú vayas con él. The problem is that I could show it to you like that, but nobody's going to say it like that. They're not going to put the subject. It's not wrong, but it's not right either. Because you only put the subject in Spanish if it's usted, right? And that's only sometimes. If there's confusion, and there's no confusion here, or to emphasize, and none of that is true, because you already know the subject of the sentence. The subject of the next sentence for the second clause is yo. Why? Because the indirect object in the first clause, it's me. Me obliga a que. Now, the reason you have a que in one versus que in the other, because that's what the verb requires. A que. You saw it in keywords that some verbs require the a que, others require just the que. So me obliga, that me is the indirect object. Me obliga a que coma todo. She makes me eat everything. So the first clause, me obliga. The subject is, he, she, or it. So she makes who? Me. That me in Spanish becomes the subject of the second clause. So you could say, although you don't, because in Spanish you don't say it like that. You don't put the subject. But it's not wrong, but it's just not said. You don't do it. Me obliga a que yo coma todo. Now, the subject of the next sentence is tú, of the second clause. Te prohíbo que vengas aquí. I forbid you to come here. So, first clause, te prohíbo, I forbid you. So we already know who's being told not to do something, the te. Second clause, tú vengas aquí, que tú vengas aquí. Te prohíbo que tú vengas aquí. So in blue is the indirect object, starting with the first sentence, stay, may, they. So you tell me what you want or don't want, or what you are forbidding, or what you're ordering. Then you have the K, and then that te becomes the subject of the second clause. Let me read it to you again. Maybe it'll make more sense. There are verbs of advice or command which are constructed with an indirect object. That indirect object in the principal or main clause also functions as the subject of the subordinate clause. The verb in the subordinate clause must be in the subjunctive. There's the subordinate, there's the main clause, te digo, me mandan, me obliga, te prohíbo. Que or a que, depending on the verb. Now the subordinate clause is who you are telling, who you are ordering, who you are making to do something, and who you are forbidding. So in the first clause, te digo que tú vayas con él. Second, me mandan a que yo vaya. Me obliga a que yo como todo. Te prohíbo que tú vengas aquí. Now, let me show you some of the key words that they're talking about when you're talking about the indirect object. You're talking about aconsejar a. It's a que. Animar a. Ayudar a. Dejar, no a, dejar que. Okay, if I don't have the a, it's just the que. Impedir, incitar a, inducir a, invitar a, mandar que. So there's no a que, it's just que. Ordenar, obligar a. Permitir, I have that too there, brain freeze. Permitir, and it only means when it's not a synonym to consentir, okay, which requires que, to permit, but not a synonym to consentir, which requires que. Okay, here we go. Let me give you another set of verbs. Well, not another set, just a couple more verbs. Persuadir a, and that you can see that's a cognate. Prohibir, so it's prohibir, and so it's proponer. Somewhat. Prohibir, proponer, and recomendar. These are verbs that take the indirect object in the main clause, either ake or que, and in the subordinate clause, the indirect object in the main clause is the subject of the subordinate clause. It's a matter of turning it around, because we don't construct our sentences like this in Spanish. So if you don't understand in the beginning, eventually you'll get it. The subjunctive is what you must understand. You can't just do it automatically. Like I don't think you can do it in any tenses, but maybe other tenses allow you more than others. This is really long video, so I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you for coming to my either my platform or my YouTube channel. Please think about subscribing, and have a good day. So that's Coralla Ficklin, McLean. I'm going to stop sharing. Welcome.com. Thank you and have a good day. Bye.